Welcome to another edition of the podcast known as Blending the Family. I am your host, Tommy Maloney. Thank you for coming by. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And hopefully you will learn something on this episode, most likely not from me, but from my guest, Tara Eisenhard. And we'll explain in a little bit who Tara is, or maybe who Tara isn't. I don't know. How are you doing? You doing good? I can't believe it's, when am I recording this? December 2nd. I live in northern Colorado, and we have yet to have any snow. No snow. Now, yes, I would love occasionally for the, it helps with water here in Colorado. It helps with the yard, the front and backyard, but I hate shoveling. I grew up in Chicago. I hate shoveling. There you are. And so, like I said, we're December and my Toastmaster friends are probably cringing right now, but that's okay. Have you seen the new Beatles documentary? I loved it. And I was never, even though my mom had a lot of the Beatles albums, I never really listened to them. That's all I'm listening to these days in the house. Either here in my home office or upstairs, and with the dot speakers. That's all I've been listening to, are Beatles tunes. Loved the documentary. The one big takeaway I would say is, if you want to become a rock and roll star, such as the Beatles were, you need two ingredients. One, you must smoke like a chimney and drink like there's no tomorrow. That's what I got out of that documentary. But overall, Peter Jackson did a great job putting the footage together and creating a storyline. It is long. I think it's 8 hours long, but I watched it over the Thanksgiving holiday because it was just myself, our dog Otis, and my daughter Becca's kitten. I'm saying kitten, Leo. And we spent the holiday together. It was wonderful. At the same time, I also watched Ted Lasso for the first time. I've kept hearing about it. I'm a huge fan of Jason Sudeikis, his time on Saturday Night Live, and I started watching it, and I think it's a brilliant show. Even if you're not into sports, it has a great storyline, or storylines, I should say. And I've learned from a business point of view, information. Let's see, hold on, I gotta grab that note. Where did I put that note? Here it is. I think this is it. Yeah. So here, actually, I wrote down 3 things because eventually I'm going to write an article either on the website or on LinkedIn. These are 3 things I learned from watching Ted Lasso. And if you've seen the show, you'll understand. If you haven't, please go ahead, jump on Apple TV and watch it. So the 3 things I've learned from watching Ted Lasso from a business point of view, that is, number 1, positive attitude. And yes, Jason Sudeikis' character, Ted Lasso, has a great positive attitude. Number 2, surround yourself with a circle of friends / influencers. And what I quickly mean by that is, Ted Lasso, he is an American football coach, and now he's going to London, England, to coach their football. I won't say that S word because I grew up, I played that sport, loved that sport, miss playing that sport, especially indoor. I miss playing indoors. But he knows his limitations, so he surrounds himself with smarter people. And if you're the smartest person in the room, you need a bigger room. So positive attitude, surround yourself with a circle of influencers or friends. Number 3, what we learned in season 2, therapy. Ask for help. And that's where my mind was this past holiday, this Thanksgiving holiday, because I was having, as much as I enjoy being alone, as much as I have a hermit lifestyle when all the family's gone, I will admit, because my mom asked me, she goes, "Were you lonely?" And I told her no, I lied. Yes, I lied to my mother. Get over it. Even though I had Otis and Leo, I was a bit lonely, I will admit. And a lot of tears from watching Ted Lasso because, well, you have to watch it. Just watch it. Anyway, so there you go. Life lessons from Ted Lasso. Positive attitude, circle of friends, seek therapy. All right. On this episode of the podcast, Tara Eisenhard is on this show. And who is Tara? Thank you for asking. Well, Tara is a divorce coach. She helps struggling singles, that's plural, transform conflict and confusion into clarity, confidence, and control. She's a child of divorce, an ex-wife, a next wife, and the previous partner of a divorced dad. Personal experience taught her that divorce is about evolution, not dissolution. Tara works as a coach, author, mediator, and educator with a passion for healthy and happy divorces. She provides personal private coaching as well as online courses and community events. Tara is the author of the book, The D Word, Divorce Through a Child's Eyes, the workbook, Your Bittersweet Beginning, and the blog, Relative Evolutions. She's been interviewed for various radio and TV programs, and her writing has been featured by the Huffington Post. Huge fan of the Huffington Post. DivorceMoms.com, Family Affairs, DivorceForce. She's in DivorceForce. They won't take me. They won't accept any of my stuff. So anybody's listening to DivorceForce, it's not too late. Stepmom Magazine and MariahShriver.com. There you are. That's the ins and outs. Some of the things Tara and I talk about in this episode. I forgot to turn my light on. Hold on. I got to turn my light on. I can't see. Can't see. There we go. Light is on. So a few of the topics we talk about. Building relationships with your future bonus kids. Trial and error when that's happening. Creating moments when you're introducing kids to your new quote-unquote friend. Using air quotes. Honesty and self-awareness. You'll hear what that is all about on this episode with Tara. I have a new rule, I think, going forward with any guests on this podcast, and that is you have to have a dog. Have to have a dog, because it's so nice to start off the show with asking about dogs. I love dogs. All right, I will admit, I'll just sidetrack you right here. I did enjoy my moments with Leo. Not a big cat fan. I will always be a dog person. It's just like, I grew up in Chicago. I'm a Cub fan. All right? Either you're either you're a dog fan or a cat fan. Either you're a Cub fan or a Sox fan. So, in my case, I'm a dog fan. But I did have fun with Leo. Okay, there we go. I think we've covered everything. Home Chef. By the way, if anybody has any connections with Home Chef, that I'm not a fan for this podcast to have outside sponsorship. I just want people to come to my website, sign up for my coaching program, my speaking. But I will take one little caveat, and that'll be Home Chef. At the local grocery store, they have the Home Chef kits. Oh my gosh. I'm making one tonight. I'm making the teriyaki steak for my wife Ann and I tonight. And oh my gosh. It makes me look like I know what the hell I'm doing in the kitchen. And I'm not a cook. But I enjoy it. Matter of fact, my wife and I are talking about for Christmas getting a new set of chef knives for for the kitchen because ours suck. Anyway, there you go. I think we've talked about the Beatles, talked about Ted Lasso, mental health. Our guest Tara Eisenhard. Did I mention? I didn't mention where. You can find her at taraeisenhard.com. Let me spell that. TaraEisenhard.com. Same for Instagram, where you can find her at Tara's Einhard. And you can also find her on Facebook at author Tara Eisenhard. All right, there you go. Whew, we got through that together. Well, let's end it together and let Tara do more talking, or let Tara talk. It's her turn to talk. And as our good friend Terry Crews would say, your success is my success. Well, Tara, first of all, thank you for coming to the podcast, Blending the Family. I appreciate your time today. And as I was just mentioning to you before I hit the record button, I am going to hit you out of the gate with a very hard-hitting question. And that hard-hitting question is, Tara, what's the name of your dog?
Oh, that's a great question. My dog's name is Tara.
No way.
Yes. I did not name her.
Okay.
But what happened was my dog passed away. My last dog passed away back in 2014. I wasn't ready for another dog at the time. I adopted an old cat, and I ended up having him for about 4 years. And in the meantime, I became ready for another dog. And what I was looking for was very specific. I wanted a female American Bulldog, but I wanted her to be very small, and I wanted her to get along with cats and other dogs. And I wanted her to come specifically through the American Bulldog Rescue, because that's where I've gotten all of my other dogs, and rescue is very important to me. And so what happened was, amazingly enough, this dog, exactly what I ordered from the universe, came through the American Bulldog Rescue. 40 pounds, female, gets along with everybody, and she literally had my name on her. So I said, that's my dog, and I adopted her.
I love the fact that you said, this is what came through the universe. That's awesome.
That's what I asked for.
And that's what you got. Tara got Tara.
Yes.
How old is Tara?
So I don't know for sure, but I think she's somewhere between 4 and 5.
Awesome. As I warned you, because I already heard my dog Otis is somewhere lurking down here from the home office, and I do have my door closed, so hopefully he won't bother us too much. But if he does, he does. That's part of life.
Yes, I'm okay with that.
So you are a divorce coach, and one of the things I really am honored when I get to talk to people in this space, such as you, Tara, is, as you say in your website, this was not the career you were thinking about, as a small child. So how did you get into or stumble into the world of being a divorce coach?
So that is a great question. It starts a long time ago. My parents got divorced when I was a teenager, and they had a very good divorce. In the beginning, it was really scary and it was sad. But overall, my family life improved so much when my parents didn't have to live in the same house together. Their relationships with each other improved. My relationships with each of them improved, because I got to, see them more like one-on-one, and got to know them as people instead of just mom and dad as a unit. My family grew as a result of that. My parents started dating. They brought on new partners. There were more people around me that loved me, supported me, helped me with my homework. And so overall, it was a good thing. And I had no idea how lucky I was. And I was just living my life and going about the world. And then I got married and I got divorced. And when I got divorced, I realized exactly how lucky I'd been as a child, and I was so confused because I was really glad to be divorced. It was an unhealthy situation, and felt very free. I was glad. I saw this as a solution to a problem. My ex and I were on the same page. We didn't hate each other. We were working together through the process. And nobody was happy for me. Everybody was either sad for me or they were very angry on my behalf. And everybody wanted to tell me what to do and what I needed to do and who to call and what lawyers to use. And I was really confused by that. And so I started just looking for information because I was absolutely bewildered. Like this is not what my parents went through, or this is not what I saw my parents go through, and this isn't what I want. This isn't the kind of process I want. So I just started looking for resources to learn about, what what makes people so crazy around divorce, and and how
Our
can it
former spouses, that's what makes us
yeah,
crazy.
so, sometimes, and how can it be better? And so I went to Amazon. It was the first Amazon purchase that I made in my entire life. Um, I went to Amazon and I bought the book "The Good Divorce" by Constance Ahrens, and it was all about studies that she had done on people who were getting divorced, and I learned a lot from that, and I wanted to learn more, so I kept reading everything that I could get my hands on about divorce and the psychology behind it and things like that. Then I started dating a divorced dad, and he had the crazy ex-wife and these kids that were stuck in the middle. And I was trying to figure out what is my role and how do I relate in this new family. And so I started looking for resources on that. And eventually I learned a whole lot. I became very passionate about what's broken in our systems and how it could be better. And when my family and friends got sick of listening to me talk about it, I started writing a blog, which then from there I discovered Twitter. And the world kind of opened up from there. I realized that there's a whole at the time, just kind of breaking through the surface, group of healthy divorce professionals out there. And I found a woman who was a divorce coach, and I looked at what she did. I had never heard of it before, and I was like, yes, that's it. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to help people to have a healthier process. I knew I didn't want to be an attorney. I thought I did at one point, but then I realized that that's kind of part of the problem, and I wanted to work outside the current paradigm and change the conversation. And I saw coaching as the way to do that. So that is my very long-winded answer as to how I got to where I am today.
Well, we're going to unpack several of your points in there. One of the things you talked about was your friends were either angry or sad at you, and to me that relates to community divorce, and that's where your friends and family within your tight knit community start taking sides.
Mhm.
Was that what you were going through? Were people taking sides in
They
in
thought that they
in the
needed
divorce?
to. Yeah. And my ex and I didn't ask for that. We didn't go to our respective families and friends and say the other person is a terrible person. At least I didn't do that. And I'm assuming that he didn't either, but I really don't know. But people just assumed that that was what they were supposed to do, that they were supposed to dig their heels in and be an ally on the side that they chose. And that was one of the really big wake up calls for me when I realized exactly how much we treat divorce like war. And collecting allies is part of that process. You collect your allies, you hire your general or your attorney in this case, you strategize for battle, and then you see who's going to win the war. And when that's all well and good for an actual war, but we're talking about families and relationships here, parents and children and extended families, and that's not healthy.
I agree, and you're talking about how you thought maybe a career path of going into being an attorney, and then you realize no, and that's where I've had um, attorneys and even past attorneys talk about family court, and how evil family court is. And so, when you're part of that and you see it firsthand, and you just take a step back and you look at these attorneys going, where's the integrity? Where, even with the judges, where's that integrity as well? And so I want to say kudos to you, Tara, for not taking that path.
Thank you. It was very easy for me. It was kind of a no-brainer because that wasn't what my parents did. But when people started to give recommendations to me, I started to question it a little bit. But thankfully, I wasn't out for blood. And so the fact that I wanted to, just go on my way and support myself and live my life, that was a really big factor in being able to say, no, I don't want to go down that path and make things ugly and spend a whole lot of money because it's very expensive to do that.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think you have to sell your soul as part of the deal.
Hmm.
Yeah. You were talking about dating a divorced dad and your role. Did you ever define your role?
I did, not necessarily in terms of a title, but what I came to be in that situation and what I came to see myself as was, and we were together for several years, but we never got married. We lived together. I wasn't an official stepmom. Um, but I saw myself as, just another adult in these children's lives. And when I talk to other parents about being able to accept their ex's new partner, I say, think about it like you would your child's teacher. This is somebody that you don't necessarily know a whole lot about, but your child's going to spend a lot of time with them. They're going to help your child to grow and to learn. You want your child to have fun with this person. You want your child to respect this person and listen to this person because they're going to, help to keep your child safe. And that's kind of how I came to see myself and in that kind of a role. I wasn't a parent. I didn't want to be a parent, but I wanted to be a respected adult figure. And eventually I was able to form, decent relationships with my now ex's children, um, where we did have mutual respect for each other and we did have fun together. But I was somebody that they listened to. If I told them, look both ways before you cross the street, they would respect that direction from me. But I wasn't their primary parent.
How did you establish or create a relationship with them? What steps did you take?
It was a lot of trial and error. But what it really came down to is to recognize that it wasn't about me. It wasn't about what I wanted. It wasn't about what my goals were for the relationship or anything like that. It was about acknowledging where they were, what their comfort level was with me, and meeting them there and being able to just hold space for them in whatever space they needed and support them in whatever help they needed. So if that meant, cheering for them at a sporting event, I would do that. If that meant helping them with their homework, I would do that. If that meant that we had a free afternoon and they were hungry and wanted to try a recipe in the kitchen, I was there to help them with that kind of a thing. And we built those relationships very, slow and steady over time.
The one thing you were talking about earlier about, treating it as, meeting a new teacher, I always like to equate it as you're meeting new people, um, and to do it in a neutral location.
Mhm.
Um, and that's what we did with my wife's two daughters and my son. We did it at a neutral location just because I felt that if we did it at like a restaurant, you're forcing the kids to talk to each other or be in the same space. But if you do it at a neutral location, there's really no pressure there. And if they bond, they bond. If they don't, they don't. Then you just move on. And very fortunate that all the kids got along right away. And matter of factly, the, um, my son and my one of my bonus daughters, they're still in, they're constantly, I should say, in communication with each other through either texting each other or through social media. And so I look back at, building those relationships, and again, just having them at a location that there was no pressure. And after, see, my wife and I are been married for over 9 years, and I would say that we're been together for maybe 11. So, most of the kids, they were very young, and I get excited when I hear that they're all talking to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And the neutral location is so important, and something that I recommend to people when they're going through those kinds of introductions is to incorporate some kind of an activity. And seeing a movie together is really easy because everybody knows this might be a little bit awkward. So you go into this dark theater, there's no pressure to talk. You sit, you watch this movie, you eat your popcorn and your candy and whatever. And then when you walk out of the movie, everybody has shared an experience. And so there's something to talk about. There's something that you can bond over because you've all just shared this same experience. And it's a neutral location, and there's no pressure, and there's something immediate that you can connect with. And that makes it a lot easier than doing some kind of a high pressure, let's all have family dinner in somebody's house kind of thing. That's just a lot for everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Tara, because again, you're forcing, these young adults into a situation that they're not comfortable with, and chances are they might just shut down and just not want to engage. Versus, like you were saying, you go to a movie, you don't have to talk. You can just sit there and absorb the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was a teenager, and my dad, after my dad got together with his girlfriend at the time, she had a daughter that was a few years younger than me, and I met her at the house, and that was really weird. Like I went into this new territory. It was super uncomfortable, um, and it was really uncomfortable for a while everybody was just kind of trying to hang around and make small talk. And then at some point in that evening, my dad's girlfriend had this box of ceramics and a bunch of paint that she got out, and we started painting ceramics together. And that changed the entire dynamic because now we were doing something together. Now we were able to say, oh, that bunny looks really cute. I like the way that you drew the eyes or whatever. And it changed everything. It made everything so much more comfortable.
That is brilliant. I mean, that is just, I mean, I started thinking about, when uh, one of my dad's girlfriends that I met, and I did not handle it well at all. And I do wish that there was a little bit more preparedness. Uh, like your example with the ceramics. One of the little unique traditions that I had brought to our family was I would, around the holidays, I would get the gingerbread kits.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we would do. We would make gingerbread houses and just bond that way. So that's a great idea. The ceramics and the paint. I'm gonna borrow that idea from you, Tara.
I'm going to borrow the gingerbread houses.
There you go. See, a win-win situation.
Absolutely.
Um. So at age 13 is when your parents got divorced. I find that unique because a lot of the people I've met, their parents divorced when the kids were at earlier age. Um, I know it's hard to play the what if game, but being 13, you're going into young adult teenage angst maybe.
Mm-hmm.
How did it affect you when it came to as you became an adult and relationship wise? Was there anything that you had a little bit of a hindrance to going through your parents' divorce to, then becoming into the world of dating?
That's such an interesting question, and I've thought about that a lot because initially, I was 13. I was becoming interested in boys and dating and things like that. And so initially, when my parents got divorced, it was one of those things where, and part of the grief process too, like it's anger. And so for a long time, I said, I'll never get divorced. I don't want to be like my parents. I'm never going to get divorced. I'm going to find somebody, and that's going to be it. And so I was looking for the first several years that I was dating. I was looking to make a lifelong partner out of everybody that I dated, which was so not healthy. Um, but you learn and grow. And I realized it somewhere along the line. I realized that that was ridiculous, and I realized that my life and my parents' lives got better after the divorce. And so I found myself in my early 20s then saying, I was actually having a conversation with somebody and saying, yeah, you know what, I might get divorced someday, and that's fine, because I had realized from my parents' relationship, and then also too, like, dating people through high school, and then we broke up, and that was okay. It wasn't some kind of mortal sin to break up with your boyfriend when you're in high school. um and I realized that it's okay, and that people change, and that relationships change, and people start new chapters of their lives, and that's okay. It's all just part of life, and it's part of learning and growing, and we're learning and growing all the time. So I'm okay with that.
I have. I'm very honored when a lot of um, men come on this podcast and they're very vulnerable and they talk about, their anger when it came to breakups and divorce and the world of co-parenting. One of the things they talk a lot about is, going through depression. With you saying that you had anger, did that develop into any kind of depression that you recognized, or was it like you're saying, broke up with a boyfriend, other fish in the sea, no worries?
Yeah, so it was something in between those two things. I was never I was never able to say, there's other fish in the sea." Because I did, grow very attached, and I still have, very a healthy regard for everybody that I've ever dated, all the way back into high school. And through my ex-husband and the man that I was with after him. Um and part of that is just because of what I've learned about relationships and divorce and things like that. They were part of my journey in becoming myself, and we shared some really great times together. And when it was good, and it was right when it was happening. And then things changed, and it was time to be over. And any loss of any relationship has been painful. I don't think that I have really experienced like a severe clinical depression as a result of the end of a relationship, um, or as a result of my parents' divorce. I was filled with all kinds of teenage emotions and things like that, but never to the point where I was suicidal or needed to be medicated or anything like that. Um, but like I said, also not able to shrug my shoulders and say, there's other fish in the sea. I've spent my share of crying on the floor.
Oh my gosh, you just threw a memory in my head when I was at a parent teacher conference. It was in the midst of the divorce, and I went to my son's school, and as I always think about this memory now, I have to laugh because, ironically, Saturday Night Live had a parent teacher bit this past
I
weekend with
saw
Jason
that.
Sudeikis. And the thing that cracked me up was that they had all the adults sitting in those small chairs, like the
Mm-hmm.
kid-sized chairs. So that was what I was doing. I'm sitting there talking to this teacher who I knew through a mutual friend. And I had, your typical guy. I was holding everything in. I wasn't talking to anybody. You know, people didn't know unless they looked at my hand and saw that there was no ring there. They would still see like the tan mark from the ring. Like I said, Tara, I kept everything in, and we were talking. The teacher and I were talking about my son and how he was doing, and then I just lost it. I'm just like bawling, and she's like, "Don't worry, we will take care of him, and we know what's going on. Don't worry." And I'm like, yeah, "Thank you, thank you." So I'm walking back to the house. I was partially living in the house at the time, and I went back to the house and I just threw myself on the floor crying. And our dog, he was a Australian Shepherd named Kiwi, and Kiwi he was, oh, what a great dog. But he came over to me and he was just nudging me, and just not that Kiwi was crying, but
Mm-hmm.
it was just yeah, been there, done that, got the T-shirt.
Yeah. Oh, dogs are so great when you're going through something like that. When I got divorced, I had two American bulldogs at the time, and they were more than happy to jump up and fill the empty space in the bed. They gave me a reason to get out of bed in the morning and a reason to come home at night, not stay out too late, having fun and enjoying my new single life.
Right.
They were there to for me to cry into their fur when I needed to. I love dogs.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm thinking about my dog right now. Anyway, um, I think you've got that healthy mindset that we all go through. Our parents get divorced, and we're getting ready to get married, and we're not going to cross that divorce line. We're going to say this stops here, and then numerous years later, we're in the same old. And I, my I guess gauntlet was the fact that I knew studies that if you came from a divorced family, chances are you were going to get divorced. And I was like, nope, not going to happen. Even when my former spouse and I were going through counseling, I'm thinking, people in counseling don't get divorced. Even the counselor was shocked that we got divorced. And now I'm going, you were shocked? Yeah. So I think it's a healthy mentality that you are wanting to stop that process and go, nope, this marriage is going to stick out, this marriage is going to last. And next thing you know, you're talking to lawyers and trying to figure out who's getting what furniture.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, nobody gets married thinking, well, if it doesn't work out, we'll just get divorced. And that's important. It's important to note that people get married and they make a commitment and they want to keep that commitment. Everybody does in good faith, but things do change, and doesn't matter how much you don't want to get divorced. It's not completely up to you sometimes.
True.
And it's just
Oh,
part of the messy process of being human.
yes. Again, like you, Tara, I can laugh about, the pain and, going through that. And even, a couple years after the divorce, going through family court. And now it's just like, I look at it, not necessarily a badge of honor, but more of, you can't hurt me. I've been divorced. I had to beg a judge not to allow my former spouse to move out of state. There's nothing really you can do to me these days. Been there again, done that, and got another T-shirt out of it.
Hmm. Hmm. It's true. It's a huge thing to go through. And when you're going through it and those years of going through all of this, constant drama and going to court and begging the judge not to let your ex, take your child, or begging the judge for something else or whatever it is, or paying your lawyer or trying to get your ex to pay your lawyer because you're not the one who's driving this bus. Um, and then when it's all over, you're absolutely right, it leaves you with this suit of armor that you've kind of built up over time. And that's actually one of the things that I kind of caution people around too, when I talk about making sure that you're maintaining your humanity, because it's really easy to come through all of that, have that suit of armor, and then say, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to love anyone again. I'm never going to trust anyone again. It's just me against the world, and that's the way it is. And that's not a healthy way to live either. There's no vulnerability there.
No, not at all. And I go back to, one of the things, we were talking before we started recording about Zig Ziglar, and I always remember Zig Ziglar talking about if you're going or if you're in a state of being down, let's say depression, and I know it's not always easy to set a time limit. For me, I've always talked about either in articles I've written or on this podcast, talking about, for me, depression is like fog. The fog will roll in and then it will roll out. But Zig Ziglar talked about trying to set a time limit of being down and, like you're saying with your dogs, giving you purpose to get out of bed, finding a purpose. And I really wish I had listened to those words, because for me, it was a good 6 months before I could have gotten out of my own way. And I was a wreck.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I wish I really had listened to that and said, I'm not going to let this road bump, defeat me. And that's how I felt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Zig said, motivation follows the action. You have to do the thing, get out of bed, and then you'll want to have gotten out of bed. It is really hard. It's funny how much I like Zig Ziglar, and I know that he would not approve of what I do.
Well, you bring a little good segue, because I want to ask you, as a divorce coach, and let's say your new client is you, what would you advise you when you were going through your divorce?
So that's such a great question. And so I have to back up here a little bit, because if I'm going to advise me, I have to take out this key light bulb moment in my life. But it's where I start with a lot of people. So the night that my ex and I decided to get divorced, he came home late one night. We'd been having trouble since we got married, even before that, really. But the past few weeks had been especially bad. I'd been sleeping on the couch a lot, and really just entrenched in being miserable. And he came home late from work one night. He told me he was working late. He wasn't working late. He was with his girlfriend, but I found that out later. And he came home and he said, I think we should separate. He just walked into the bedroom, and it's like 11:30 at night. And he says, I think we should separate. And I was like, what? Because in that moment, he just kind of drops this bomb in the middle of the room. And I was so just confused we hadn't talked about any of this at all. And he says, yeah, he said, I've been talking to my mom about this. I was talking to her on the way home. And she really, she suggested that it's probably a good idea for us to separate. And I was like, you've been talking to your mother about our marriage? Like, how dare you? Why don't you talk to me? And I was so mad. I got up, I took off my wedding rings, I threw them in my jewelry box, I stomped out of the room. And he followed me. And I'm like, I went down the hall, and I was sitting in our office and seething, just sitting in front of the dark room, in front of the computer and it was a Dell. So this like blue screen, glowing. And And he followed me and he stood in the doorway. So I looked up and I could see him illuminated by this blue light from the computer screensaver. And he said to me, "Isn't this what you want? Don't you hate me?" And I thought about it for a second, and it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And I said to him, "Yeah, I do hate you. You're right. We need to get divorced." And from that moment, everything changed. The entire dynamic of our relationship changed. When I told him that I hated him, I could stop hating him. And it made everything else so easy in our process. We finally found that common ground to admit to each other that we weren't happy. And it, that weekend or the next weekend or something, we had a family friend who was an attorney, and we met with him to help us figure out like what we were going to do. And so he kind of said, well, who's going to do what? When are you going to move? And all of this stuff. And at one point, my then husband got up to go to the bathroom, and the family friend looked at me and said, "You're glowing." And I was like, yeah, I'm really happy. And so I have to tell you that story to go back to answer your question. If I was my client, and where I start with a lot of my clients is to be really honest about the situation and to know yourself. Honesty and self-awareness are so powerful in your process, and having that self-awareness to know how unhappy I was, and the honesty to be able to say it to him, and for him to be able to say it to me. And then from there, it illuminated the next step in the path. And so that's really what it's all about, is checking in with yourself, being honest about the situation, and then saying to yourself, okay, how am I feeling? What am I needing? What's my appetite for everything right now? Can I handle getting on a phone call with my lawyer and talking about this right now? Or do I need to take 10 minutes and go cry? All of that helps to kind of determine the best way forward. So that's really where it all starts.
I love it. Honesty and self-awareness. I mean, not to just throw that word around a lot, because I guess that's a buzzword these days about being self-aware, but it is true. You really, I go back to looking at going through many years of therapy, and especially before my divorce and after my divorce, I stayed with the same therapist because I really felt I connected with her, and I didn't want to go to another therapist and rehash everything. And the thing that I take away from your story again is the self-aware, and knowing yourself, and knowing that thinking about the future, and who is going to love me versus who's going to look for me. It's about trying to figure out yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who's coached other divorced men, the first thing a lot of those guys do, and I'm sure you've ran into this as well, Tara, is they're looking for the next Mrs. Wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And they're bouncing from relationship to relationship instead of trying to figure out who they are.
Yeah.
Or even if they had, before they got married, maybe they had some type of hobbies, and they had to put them on the invisible shelf. Well, now that you're single, take those hobbies off the shelf, dust them off, and go figure out what makes you happy. And once you discover that, you can share your happiness and joy with a new person.
Exactly. And you hit on so much there, because even backing up to the therapist, when you know yourself, you're able to ensure that you're working with the right professionals, whether that's your lawyer, your therapist, your real estate agent. When you know yourself and you know your values and you know your goals, you're able to make sure that you're working with people who are going to be appropriate for you and support you in the way that you need to be supported. Um, and then beyond that, getting to that point where you are a fully formed and functioning human being with goals and dreams and things that you're working towards and hobbies that you like to do, instead of just this empty shell looking for a new relationship to fill you.
Yeah. And because I had a friend years ago, and he would bounce from relationship to relationship. I mean, we were young at the time, in our 20s, and I kept saying to him, I go, "You're dating cereal." He's like, "What?" I said, "You're dating cereal. It doesn't matter if it's Captain Crunch or my gosh,
Cornflakes.
my cornflakes. Thank you, Tara. It's cereal at the end of the day." And I said, "You're dating the same type of person, and they're not really, helping you become somebody better. You're just dating the same person." And he didn't realize it until he took a step back, when he goes, "Oh yeah." And I think it goes back to, again, self-awareness and understanding that if you are keep going through the same path, you got to find a different path. You got to find, somebody to nudge you. And that's why I'm always on the soapbox about therapy. Even when I got remarried, my wife Ann said, "Would you be okay going to marriage counseling before we get married?" I said, "Yes," because we didn't want to make the same mistakes that we just got out of these
Mm-hmm.
horrendous relationships with. And it really put our marriage, um, in a good, positive, um, environment,
Mm-hmm.
before we said the I do's.
Yeah. And that's another thing with the self-awareness, and something else that I talk about a lot is the environment, making sure that you're getting the right nourishment. And so people are kind of like plants, which might be slightly offensive to, degrade us in such a way. But if you take a cactus and you try to put it in a tropical environment, it's not going to thrive. And the same thing if you try to take a tropical orchid and you put it in the desert, it's not going to thrive. And so when you know yourself, you're able to put yourself in an environment to ensure that you're getting the right kind of nourishment for your soul, so to speak. And making sure that you're choosing an appropriate partner, and making sure that you're nourishing your marriage. When you know yourself, you're able to talk to your partner about the kinds of things that your partner needs to know. How are you feeling? What are you needing? What's going on? Or, how are you, I think we need to work on this kind of an issue, or something like that. That's good information. And it's scary, and it's weird. It's not necessarily super fun or anything like that, but it's really important to have a healthy relationship with yourself and healthy relationships with other people.
So let's talk about your book, The D Word. And I'm going to assume the D word means divorce.
Yes.
I've never been in a Mensa meeting, and you can see why. Um, so who was the target audience for the book, The D Word?
So the target audience is actually parents. And when I started writing the book, I thought that I was writing a book for 12-year-old girls. Um, I started to write this story about this 12-year-old girl who was watching her parents go through a divorce. And I'm a huge fan of Judy Blume. And
Oh, yes. Yes. Love Judy Blume.
yes, and so she just writes about adolescence better than anyone. And so I wanted to write this Judy Blume kind of style book, which she did write a really good book about divorce. It's called It's Not the End of the World. um, but so that's what I thought I was doing. I thought I was writing a book for 12-year-old girls, and I got into it a little bit farther, and I thought, no, you know what, actually, this book is fine for 12-year-old girls to read. It's fine for kids because they can probably relate to the main character and the experience that she has. But what I really wanted, the purpose of the book, I wanted parents and adults in general to be able to experience what divorce looks like from the perspective of a 12-year-old girl. Because one of the problems that toxifies our divorce process is the assumptions that people make about what the story is. And so we talked earlier about kind of getting entrenched in your own sides, and having allies and people on your side. And it's really natural to assume that everybody who's on your side sees what you see and identifies problems the way that you do. And it's just part of how we cope as being humans. It's a, adaptation that we've made. Most of the time that's fine. But the problem in a divorce, especially a contentious divorce, is that parents can look at their ex and see a complete monster. And then they look at their child and they say, oh, my poor child has a monster as a parent, and I need to protect my child from this monster, or my child is afraid of this monster. And that's not necessarily what the child's experience is. And so I wanted to put together a story and show parents, like, have them actually step inside this kid's shoes and see what she's seeing and see her confusion. She's hearing her mom on the phone, and she's hearing one side of the conversation, and she's trying to put things together. And she talks to her friends about her parents getting divorced, and she feels really, really weird about it. And her one friend's parents have been divorced forever, and she says, oh, it's whatever, it's not a big deal. And she feels really isolated and alone. And she's having this entire experience unbeknownst to her parents, and especially her mother, who she's in the primary care of. And her mother thinks that everything's fine because the daughter hasn't changed friends. She's still getting good grades in school. There's no red flags. She's not saying that anything's wrong. So I guess everything's fine. And she's not arguing with me when I assume that she's on my side. So it's all great. And the fact is that it's not.
Wow. A lot of things popped in my head. When you're talking about, the character Gina saying to her friends, parents are getting divorced, and they're like, essentially, yeah, our parents have been divorced for a long time. I remember in high school, and um, the all 4 years of high school, it was the three Toms. We all had lockers right next to each other because of our last name. And one of the Toms, a guy named Tom McGrath. And Tom McGrath, if you're listening, I hope you're doing well. And I remember him coming to school, and he wasn't in tears. He was just, shoulders slumped. He was just feeling down. I'm like, hey, what's up? He goes, oh, my parents are getting divorced. And I was those girls. I'm like, my parents got divorced when I was 5. Join the club. And I swear, I told them, join the club, is what I said. And, you're dumb high school guys, and, you don't know anything about empathy. You don't know about sympathy. Unless you're rooting for the same sports team, then that's a different world.
Right.
But I think back going, I really wish I could have, helped him and say, how can I help you? How can we talk? Can I just sit with you? We're at lunch. You don't have to say anything. I'll just sit there with you. And I commend you in your book, The D Word, about that, because I think that obviously our world has changed, but I feel that there is more empathy out there. And I think that if the situation was different, I think I would have handled it differently for Mr. Tom McGrath.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had friends whose parents were divorced before my parents got divorced. And then when my parents got divorced, of course it was fine. It was hard in the beginning, like I said, but then overall it was fine. And I realized when I grew up and I looked back on the situations that I had seen as a child with my friends whose parents were divorced, or just other people I knew who were getting divorced, or overhearing conversations that I heard as a child, things like that, and kind of reprocessing all of that as a grown up. It's really heavy, and I had no idea before my parents got divorced. I had no idea that my friends whose parents were divorced needed anything different, um, or had some kind of different struggles, because it's just not something that you talk about. It's not fun. It's not cool, and especially when you're much younger and elementary school or whatever, and you're still playing with Barbies, those things just don't come into play. But then realizing as an adult and thinking back and saying to yourself, "Oh, wow, this girl must have really been having a hard time, because all of those things that she was dealing with, that's a lot, and that's really hard. And I don't think her parents got along very well, and that must have been really difficult for her." But when you're a kid, you just don't know.
Exactly. You don't know what you don't know. Um, what was your writing process for the book, specifically when you were writing, Gina, when you were going through, you know, her her I guess her process of the parents' divorce. So what was your writing process as you were developing Gina?
Well, I started writing the one day, and I had no intention of writing that book. I just sat down one day and started to write a story, which I've been doing since I was in fifth grade. This book was the first one that I actually finished. Um, but I just sat down and I started writing, and Gina's story is very similar to mine. I overheard my parents fighting and saying that they're going to get a divorce. My parents didn't talk to me about it really until I found out that it was going to happen, and it was while I was on my way to go on vacation. Um, and so it was very similar in that respect, and I was able to get into the character and write that. um, but then when I realized that I wanted parents to read the story, it became very important to me to tell the story of a more contentious divorce through the eyes of a child. And knowing what I knew, what I had learned as an adult, coupled with my experience when I was going through it, and what it would have been like and what it would have felt like, I crafted the story around that. And I knew that I knew kind of the elements that I wanted to touch on. Um, and I knew that I wanted it to have a resolution. So I kind of, I don't want to give away the entire story, but that's sort of how it evolved. Once I made that commitment, when I realized who I was writing it for, and I realized why I was writing it, that was the motivation that I needed to continue to stay engaged with it and develop the story and look for inspiration in other parts of my life as I was just sort of traveling through the world, and articles I read or interactions I saw on the street and things like that, that I was able to work into it.
Would you say that the D word is a little bit autobiographical, if I can say that word wrong again?
It's a little bit, but not, because it's not my story. Gina's very much like me in that, um, she's a good student. She has the same friends. She gives no indication that she's struggling at all. And that was very much the kind of child that I was, and that was how I went through my parents' divorce. It's one of the things that I talk about, in my coaching, is how important it is for parents to make an effort to create the space and invite their children to share things, because I didn't share things. I knew that my parents had their problems, and I just continued to do my job, go to school, get good grades, help take care of my younger sister, that kind of thing. Um, and of course, like we all, grow up and say either, I'm fine, or probably could have used a little bit more help there. Um, so in that respect, Gina and I are very much the same, but her parents' experience and what she went through being caught between them is nothing like what I dealt with.
What I'm trying to I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. What advice or one piece of a tip can you give to parents to have that type of dialogue. So, for example, I'm a parent. I want to have a conversation with one of my kids about, essentially, how are you feeling, when it comes to, either the divorce is fresh, or maybe, and it's probably two different answers, but how do you have that dialogue? How do you, initiate that dialogue? And I'm sure it's going to also be age appropriate, but how do you have that dialogue?
So it's important to acknowledge that, especially in families that don't naturally talk about their feelings, which a lot of them don't, it can be very awkward, and uncomfortable to initiate that, to accept an invitation into that kind of a space. And so, what I recommend is for people to have some kind of a standing family meeting where it's not that you sense something's wrong and you want to, invite conversation about some kind of new topic. Oh, dad has a new girlfriend, let's talk about it, after we've not talked about anything at all this entire time. That's kind of weird. But to establish a time when this is our share time. So it could be like, every Thursday night at 5, we're going to have family dinner, and it's going to be our family meeting. And it's an opportunity for anybody to share what's on their mind about anything. And it's important for parents to be vulnerable in this space as well. It's not just about inviting the children to share, but for parents to, again, age appropriate, but to be able to be a little bit vulnerable and say, this is really hard for me too. But I'm, I'm learning a lot, and I'm here for you, and I'm still, committed to our family, and dad and I still love you, or whatever it is that needs to be said. So it could be something that's routinely scheduled around a family dinner, or it could be something that's acknowledged as, share time when you're in the car. So maybe there's soccer practice every Wednesday night that you're in the car with your child. And if you have children who are very different ages, then it's kind of important to make those share dates individually, maybe as well as a family, but to make sure that you're creating space for one-on-one time as well. So maybe while you're on the road to soccer practice, that's just, we turn off the radio and we just talk. And this is our talk time. And it's something that's generally accepted and acknowledged. And this is what we do every week. And this is our routine. So the more you can build it into a routine and normalize it, the easier it gets to do. And if you can do that with both parents, that's fantastic. That's not always possible. Sometimes we just have to, rule our own kingdom, so to speak. So if it's a, one parent that's doing this in their home, that's better than nothing.
Yeah, in my experience, I have friends that there's no way you're putting those two exes in the same room.
Right.
We're talking WWE Battle Royale.
Yeah. And that's important to know. That goes back to that self-awareness. So self-awareness means having the coach say, it's a really good idea if you can have a family meeting with all of you. And for you to be able to say, yeah, that's not a good idea in my family.
Yeah, my mind's wandering, and I'm going to keep that thought in my head right now. Tara, I want to say thank you so much for your time. Please let the audience know how to get hold of you, how to get a hold of your book, and audience, let Tara know you are also a dog person. I know you've got cats, but dogs are better than cats, or hashtag dogs are better than cats.
They are. I am still a dog person. My husband's a cat person. I refer to him as my favorite husband, not to be confused with my first husband. So yeah, I love to connect with people. So my website is taraeisenhard.com, and my book is available generally where books are sold. It's available on Amazon. You can walk into a bookstore. They probably aren't going to have it on the shelf, but you can order it through them if you want to support your local bookstore, which is an awesome thing to do. I am on Instagram at Tara Eisenhard. I'm on TikTok at Divorce Coach. I'm on Facebook, Tara Eisenhard Divorce Coach. You can search for me there. And I'm on Twitter. My handle's a little weird, but if you Google or search Tara Eisenhard on Twitter, you'll find me there. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I do work with people one-on-one. I do, personalized private coaching to attend to whatever the unique needs are. I also have some online programs where people can sign up, work at their own pace, and go through a program to learn about overcoming shame or how to prepare for divorce or dividing their assets, things like that. I have a monthly email program to help people who are getting over a relationship where their ex cheated. That's always especially difficult. So all of that information is on my website.
Awesome. All right, Tara, I have we started with hard-hitting question at the front end. We're going to do another hard-hitting question at the back end. Are you ready for your last question, Tara?
I am. Lay it on me.
All right, Tara, here we go. If you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked that I didn't ask?
Oh.
If you could step into my shoes, and technically, I know the audience is rolling their eyes right now. I don't wear shoes. I'm wearing socks. But if you could step into my socks, which you don't want to, what would you have asked that I didn't ask?
That is such a great question. And it's a very hard question. Yeah. I guess maybe I would ask, because it's a question that people have. What is a divorce coach and why would I need one? And so I can say for anybody who is curious about coaching is a directional process, unlike therapy, which is a deep emotional dive. Coaching's all about looking at where you're at, where do you want to go, and how are you going to get there. Divorce coaches can help a lot in different aspects of divorce. There are divorce coaches that used to be attorneys, or still are attorneys, so they can help with the legal process. My mantra is that divorce is a human process with a legal document attached to it, just like marriage. So I work on the human side. I help people with the relationships. I help them to determine their goals, their next steps. I help them to communicate more effectively with a co-parent, or to establish appropriate boundaries and move more towards parallel parenting if co-parenting isn't working. So all of that human stuff I help people with.
Awesome. Well, Tara, again, thank you so much for your time. I am honored. I'm so grateful that I think it was Instagram we found each other.
I think it was LinkedIn.
What was it, LinkedIn?
Yeah. I'm on there too.
Yeah. I was trying to get rid of both my Facebook and Instagram, and I got an email from Facebook saying, "Hey, you can put your podcast up on Facebook." I'm like, "But I'm trying to leave you people."
There's so many platforms. It's really hard.
Yeah. Oh, well. But Tara, again, I am so grateful for your work. I am just grateful that anybody comes on this podcast. I'm honored that you said yes.
Thank you. I am honored that you asked me. This has been incredibly fun. I love to talk about divorce. I love divorce. It's one of the things that I say all the time, and it sounds really crazy, but I do. I love divorce. I love to talk about divorce, and we talk about dogs too, so that's even better. Thank you so much.